In the small town of Milbrook, beneath its quaint storefronts and tree-lined streets, a silent undercurrent of corruption had long been seeping into daily life. The town's serene exterior masked years of exploitation and extortion, perpetrated by crooked law enforcement who turned their badges into instruments of fear. At the heart of Milbrook's struggle stood Harold Carter, a humble auto repair shop owner whose life had been defined by honest labor and an unyielding commitment to his community. Every day, as Harold methodically repaired engines and restored battered vehicles, he reaffirmed the timeless values of hard work and integrity that had been passed down through generations. His shop was more than just a business. It was a sanctuary, a beacon of hope for those battered by the injustice that had infiltrated the town. Harold's influence, however, extended far beyond the grease and the clatter of tools. His legacy was intertwined with that of his nephew, the world-renowned boxer Mike Tyson. Although Mike had ascended to global fame as one of the most formidable athletes in boxing history, his roots remained firmly planted in the lessons learned at Harold's side. As a young man, Mike would often watch his uncle work, absorbing the unspoken wisdom of dignity, perseverance, and the importance of standing up for what is right. These formative moments shaped Mike into a fighter both inside and outside the ring, a man who believed that true power came not only from physical strength, but also from an unwavering moral compass. In Milbrook, the community had long suffered under the heavy hand of corruption. Local business owners were forced to pay protection money to crooked officers who preyed on the vulnerable and silenced dissent through intimidation and violence. The very institutions meant to protect the people had instead become agents of exploitation. Yet, amid the pervasive darkness, Harold's auto shop glowed with the light of genuine care and steadfast honesty. The walls of his modest establishment were adorned with faded photographs and relics of the past. A pair of well-worn boxing gloves hung in quiet tribute to the legacy of strength and honor that connected him to his nephew. These gloves were a daily reminder that even in a town rife with despair, hope could be found in the simple acts of perseverance and love. Every repaired engine and every satisfied customer at Harold's shop reinforced the notion that integrity was a power no amount of corruption could ever fully quench. Despite the relentless pressures of a society steeped in greed, Harold's spirit remained unbroken. His life was a continuous act of resistance against those who would see his town succumb to tyranny. The lessons he imparted, of standing tall in the face of injustice, of never compromising one's principles, had formed the bedrock of his character. They were lessons that Mike Tyson carried with him, even as he conquered arenas filled with roaring crowds. For Mike, those early experiences in Milbrook were a constant reminder that no matter how high one might rise, the fight for justice was never truly over. Thus, Milbrook existed in a paradox, a place where beauty and decay coexisted, where the simple acts of daily life stood as a bulwark against an overwhelming tide of corruption. In this fragile balance, Harold Carter and his legacy of unwavering honesty became the heartbeat of the community, a quiet revolution that pulsed with the promise of change. And though the world at large might remember Mike Tyson for his thunderous punches and unrelenting presence in the boxing ring, in Milbrook, he was also seen as the torchbearer of a deeper, more enduring strength. The strength to fight for justice with nothing but one's heart and unyielding resolve. One crisp autumn morning, the familiar hum of engines and the rhythmic clatter of tools at Harold Carter's auto repair shop was shattered by an ominous rumble. A fleet of unmarked police vehicles rolling into town with a menacing purpose. The vehicles halted abruptly outside the shop, and from them emerged a group of uniformed officers whose faces were etched with cruelty. At their helm stood Sergeant James Blake, a man whose very presence radiated malice and whose reputation for brutality had long haunted Milbrook. With a steely glare and a sneer that dripped disdain, Blake made his intentions unmistakably clear. It's time to pay your dues or watch your business go up in flames. Inside the shop, Harold had been absorbed in his work, meticulously tuning an engine with the care of a master craftsman. The comforting aroma of motor oil and the steady rhythm of his work were suddenly interrupted by the violent burst of the shop door. Two rough-looking officers stormed in, their eyes hard and unyielding. One of them snatched a wrench from the workbench, while the other barked orders that sent a chill through Harold's spine. "We're not here for small talk, old man," Blake growled, his voice slicing through the air like a razor. "Your protection fee is due, and if you refuse, your shop will suffer." Before Harold could muster a reply, chaos erupted. The officers began to ransack the modest establishment, overturning benches, scattering tools, and shattering delicate instruments with reckless abandon. Each act of vandalism was a deliberate message, a demonstration of the absolute power that corrupt law enforcement held over the people of Milbrook. As broken glass glittered on the floor like fallen stars, Harold's heart pounded with a mixture of sorrow and defiance. Standing amidst the wreckage of his life's work, he mustered the courage to speak. "I built this shop with my own two hands, and I won't let you trample on everything I've fought for." The tension in the room became palpable. One officer, his face contorted with anger, swung his baton violently, aiming to silence Harold's outburst. The impact of the blow shattered a crucial instrument, the sound echoing like a death knell in the otherwise silent shop. Outside, a small crowd of onlookers had gathered at a safe distance. Their eyes widened in horror as they witnessed the assault on one of their own, a man whose life symbolized honesty and hard work. The scene was charged with raw emotion, the desperate clamor of the oppressors clashing with the resolute defiance of a man unwilling to be broken. Amid the mayhem, Sergeant Blake's eyes locked with Harold's in a silent, searing challenge, a dare to submit to tyranny. The shop, once a haven of order and craftsmanship, had become a battleground where the forces of corruption waged war against the spirit of a community. The officers' ruthless actions were not just an assault on property, but an attack on the very soul of Milbrook. Every shattered tool and every overturned chair served as evidence of a system that had lost its way. A system where power was abused and justice was a distant dream. In that fateful moment, as the officers finally retreated, leaving behind a landscape of devastation, Harold stood alone amid the ruins. His heart ached with loss, yet it burned with a fierce determination that would not be extinguished. The initial conflict had ignited a spark of resistance that would soon swell into a conflagration of defiance. Harold Carter vowed silently that he would rebuild, not only his shop, but the spirit of the community itself. For in that shattered space, the seeds of revolution had been sown, and the battle for Milbrook's soul had truly begun. News of the brutal assault on Harold Carter's shop spread like wildfire through Milbrook and beyond, reaching the ears of a man who embodied strength and justice on a global scale: Mike Tyson. Despite the glare of international fame and the roar of packed arenas, Mike had never forgotten his humble beginnings. As he sat in his luxurious suite overseas, the heartbreaking story of his uncle, Harold, the gentle soul who had taught him the value of honor and resilience, stirred something deep within him. The thought that such an injustice had been inflicted upon the man who had shaped his life ignited a burning determination that could not be quenched. Without hesitation, Mike Tyson booked the earliest flight home. His heart pounded with a mix of anger and resolve as he envisioned the devastated auto shop, a symbol of everything his uncle had worked for. Every mile of his journey back to Milbrook was accompanied by vivid memories of long afternoons spent at Harold's side, absorbing lessons of humility and integrity. These recollections became the fuel for his mission, to stand against the forces of corruption that had long tormented his hometown and tarnished the legacy of a man he so deeply admired. Upon landing at the modest regional airport, Mike was immediately engulfed by the raw, unfiltered emotions of a place he once knew so well. The atmosphere in Milbrook was heavy with despair, its streets echoing with whispers of fear and uncertainty. Yet, amid the decay and desolation, there was a palpable undercurrent of hope, a hope that was rekindled by the imminent arrival of a hero. As Mike stepped out of the terminal, reporters and local residents swarmed him, their eyes filled with a mixture of awe and anticipation. The legendary boxer, known for his thunderous punches and indomitable spirit, had returned to his roots not for spectacle, but to fight for justice. Mike Tyson drove straight to Harold's battered shop, the vehicle's engine roaring like a war cry against the silence of oppression. The closer he got, the more memories flooded back. Memories of a simpler time, when the auto shop was a sanctuary of community pride and shared dreams. Arriving at the scene, He was confronted with the heartbreaking sight of shattered glass, overturned furniture, and tools strewn carelessly across the floor. The devastation was a stark reminder of the cruelty that had been unleashed by Sergeant James Blake and his cohorts. Without a moment's pause, Mike stepped out of his car, his imposing figure illuminated by the pale glow of streetlights. His eyes, fierce and unyielding, scanned the wreckage before him. In a voice that resonated with both authority and compassion, he addressed the small gathering of onlookers. "I'm here to set things right. Tonight, we fight back, together." His words, imbued with the weight of his storied past and the fire of personal conviction, stirred something deep within the hearts of the townspeople. They recognized in him the embodiment of the values Harold had always championed: courage, honor, and a refusal to submit to injustice. For Mike, this was not merely a homecoming, it was a sacred duty. He recalled the lessons his uncle had taught him: the importance of standing up for the weak, the power of unity, and the belief that no act of corruption could ever extinguish the flame of truth. As he approached the ruined shop, memories of his childhood mingled with the bitter reality of the present. Determination etched every line on his face, and his broad shoulders bore the weight of a promise made long ago. In that charged moment, Mike Tyson transformed from a global boxing icon into a local avenger, a man returning to his roots to defend the honor of his family and community. His arrival was a signal that the tide was turning, a call for all of Milbrook to rise up against tyranny. With his eyes blazing and his fists ready, Mike prepared to confront the forces of corruption head-on, determined to reclaim the dignity that had been stolen and to restore hope to a town on the brink of despair. His intervention was not just an act of physical strength, it was a declaration that justice, no matter how delayed, was an unstoppable force. Under the shroud of night, the atmosphere in Milbrook grew palpably tense as a showdown of epic proportions loomed near Harold's auto repair shop. The air was electric with anticipation as a band of corrupt officers, led by the notorious Sergeant James Blake, gathered once again with the intention of asserting their authority through fear and force. In the dim glow of flickering streetlights, they prepared for what they assumed would be another routine display of brutality. Instead, they found themselves facing a man whose reputation for raw power was known worldwide: Mike Tyson. Mike stepped forward from the shadows like a force of nature unleashed, his presence commanding immediate respect and fear. His eyes, burning with determination, locked onto the uniformed officers as he declared in a voice that resonated like thunder: "Tonight, you'll learn what true justice feels like." The statement hung in the air, heavy with promise and retribution, and sent a ripple of apprehension through the assembled officers. In a heartbeat, the standoff erupted into a whirlwind of motion. The officers, expecting an easy victory, lunged forward with batons and drawn weapons. But Mike was already a blur, a symphony of controlled aggression honed over decades of relentless training and countless battles in the ring. His movements were a masterful fusion of boxing prowess and martial arts precision. With a lightning-quick dodge, he sidestepped the first clumsy swing of a baton and countered with a devastating left hook that connected squarely with an officer's jaw. The impact was cataclysmic, sending the assailant crashing to the pavement in a daze. The chaos intensified as more officers attempted to overwhelm him. One aggressive thug, brandishing a baton with reckless abandon, charged forward with a wild swing. Mike anticipated the move. He parried with an expertly timed block and responded with a rapid flurry of punches. Each strike landed with pinpoint accuracy, an uppercut here, a sharp jab there, leaving his opponents reeling and gasping for air. The scene was a blur of motion and sound: the sickening thud of fists against flesh, the clatter of batons falling to the ground, and the startled shouts of officers who realized too late that they were outmatched. Amid the turmoil, the confrontation reached its dramatic apex. Sergeant Blake, desperate to reassert control, drew his weapon and advanced with a menacing glare. The tension in the air was almost palpable as Mike's eyes locked with Blake's in a silent challenge, a clash of wills that encapsulated the struggle between corruption and righteousness. With a burst of explosive energy, Mike closed the gap. In one fluid, breathtaking motion, he disarmed Blake, sending the firearm skittering across the pavement. The sound of metal clashing against metal echoed like a death knell, marking the final blow to the officer's authority. The surrounding onlookers, previously huddled in fearful silence, now watched in awe as the legendary fighter's every move became a declaration of defiance against tyranny. His actions were not simply physical combat. They were a visceral, dramatic statement that the reign of corruption was coming to an end. Each punch, every expertly executed dodge, was imbued with the spirit of resistance and the promise of justice. The vivid interplay of light and shadow on the rain-slicked street heightened the surreal intensity of the moment, as if the very city were bearing witness to a battle between good and evil. As the last of the corrupt officers staggered away into the darkness, defeated and humiliated, an overwhelming sense of catharsis washed over the gathered crowd. The intense martial arts exchange had transcended mere physicality. It had become a symbol of the community's reawakening, a beacon of hope that even the mightiest forces of oppression could be toppled by the strength of righteous conviction. In that unforgettable, adrenaline-charged night, Mike Tyson's fists spoke louder than words, sending an unmistakable message. When united by purpose, no force of corruption can ever silence the will of those who fight for justice. In the tumultuous aftermath of that fateful night, Milbrook was never the same. The explosive confrontation outside Harold Carter's auto repair shop, where Mike Tyson's ferocious intervention dismantled the corrupt enforcers of Sergeant James Blake, reverberated far beyond the shattered glass and overturned workbenches. The raw, unfiltered footage captured by vigilant citizens spread like wildfire on social media and across local news outlets, igniting a firestorm of public outrage. Federal investigators soon descended upon Milbrook, determined to uproot the deep-seated corruption that had plagued the town for years. The evidence against the crooked officers was overwhelming. Recorded testimonies, high-definition video clips, and even clandestinely gathered documents provided a damning portrait of a system long corrupted by greed and abuse. Intense courtroom sessions that felt more like battlefields than halls of justice. Key players in the extortion racket were arrested and indicted. The charges ranged from extortion and abuse of power to conspiracy and obstruction of justice, and each indictment sent shockwaves through the community. It became increasingly clear that Milbrook was at the epicenter of a scandal that reached far beyond its borders. A scandal that implicated not only low-level thugs, but also high-ranking officials and influential local politicians. For Harold Carter, the destruction of his shop had been a personal tragedy. Yet, as the town began its slow journey toward recovery, his auto repair shop was transformed into a potent symbol of resilience. Neighbors rallied together, pooling their resources and labor to repair the damage. Fresh coats of paint replaced the scars of vandalism. New glass shined where shards had once glittered like lost hopes, and every repaired engine echoed the promise of renewal. Harold's steadfast refusal to succumb to tyranny had sparked a wave of solidarity among the townspeople. His once ravaged shop was reborn as a community hub, a place where citizens could gather, share their stories of hardship, and ultimately find the strength to stand up for their rights. Inside the local police department, a quiet rebellion was underway. Officers who had long been complicit in the corrupt practices began to secretly collect evidence against their more nefarious colleagues. Their covert actions, driven by a deep-seated desire for redemption and justice, played a critical role in dismantling the pervasive network of extortion. This internal uprising soon culminated in a series of arrests that shook the very foundation of Milbrook's law enforcement. The once feared force of crooked officers was gradually replaced by a new cadre of reform-minded individuals dedicated to restoring the honor of the badge. The ripple effects of these dramatic events were felt far beyond Milbrook. Regional authorities, spurred by the outcry from a community that had finally refused to be silenced, launched sweeping investigations into local government practices. The ensuing reforms were profound. Policy changes were implemented to ensure transparency, accountability, and the active involvement of citizens in overseeing law enforcement. Public confidence, long eroded by years of abuse, began to rebuild as the promise of a fair and just system slowly emerged from the rubble of corruption. For the people of Milbrook, the journey toward change was both painful and transformative. Community meetings, once held in hushed tones, became vibrant forums where citizens openly demanded justice and accountability. Every conversation, every protest, and every act of defiance was a testament to the power of unity in the face of oppression. The courageous actions of Mike Tyson and Harold Carter had ignited a movement that not only toppled a corrupt regime, but also instilled in the people a profound belief that change was not only possible, but inevitable. In the end, the consequences of that turbulent night went far beyond the immediate arrests and reforms. They marked the beginning of a new chapter for Milbrook, a chapter defined by resilience, integrity, and the unwavering determination of a community that had reclaimed its dignity. The legacy of those events would live on in every rebuilt storefront, every honest handshake, and every spark of hope that lit up the faces of Milbrook's residents. The battle against corruption had been won, but the fight for lasting justice was only just beginning. As the sun rose over a transformed Milbrook, its golden light revealed a town reborn from the ashes of corruption and despair, a living testament to the power of unity, courage, and unwavering determination. The dramatic events that had unfolded in the dead of night, when Harold Carter's auto repair shop was ravaged by extortionists and then defended by the indomitable force of Mike Tyson, resonated far beyond the shattered walls and overturned tools. They became a clarion call, a resounding message that no system built on greed and abuse can withstand the collective will of a community determined to reclaim its dignity. At the heart of this revolution were two figures whose lives had been irrevocably intertwined. Harold Carter, the unassuming mechanic whose integrity had never wavered despite the relentless pressures of corruption, and Mike Tyson, the legendary boxer whose thunderous return to Milbrook symbolized the triumph of justice over tyranny. Their shared legacy was not one of violence for its own sake, but of righteous defiance, a belief that the power of an honest heart and a steadfast spirit could topple even the most entrenched forces of oppression. Mike Tyson's intervention, with its breathtaking display of skill and raw power, was more than just a physical confrontation. It was a dramatic declaration that true strength lies not in authority or in the weaponry of the corrupt, but in the courage to stand up against injustice. His every punch, every expertly executed move, was imbued with the lessons he had learned from his uncle, Harold. Those lessons of resilience, honor, and the sacred duty to protect the vulnerable became the cornerstone of a movement that rippled through Milbrook and beyond. For Harold, every repaired engine and every smile from a grateful customer served as a quiet reminder that integrity could triumph over even the darkest forces of greed. His modest auto repair shop, once the target of ruthless extortion, had been reborn as a symbol of hope, a sanctuary where the community could gather to celebrate their hard-won victories and pledge to never again be subjugated by corrupt power. It was here, amid the familiar sounds of tools and friendly chatter, that Milbrook's true spirit was rekindled. The story of Milbrook, of Harold and Mike Tyson, became a beacon of inspiration, a reminder that real change is born from the collective strength of individuals who refuse to accept injustice as the norm. It is a message that transcends borders and echoes in the hearts of every person who has ever felt oppressed or silenced. In every protest, every community meeting, and every act of resistance that followed, the spirit of that night lived on. The call to stand united against corruption was not merely a fleeting moment of defiance. It was a lasting legacy, an enduring promise that, no matter how dark the times, the light of truth and justice will always prevail. As Milbrook stepped boldly into a new era, defined by transparency, accountability, and mutual respect, the lessons of its turbulent past served as a guiding force for the future. The transformation of its police department, the reforms enacted by local authorities, and the renewed trust among its citizens all testified to the fact that true power lies in the will of the people. The courageous stand taken by Harold Carter and the fearless intervention by Mike Tyson had ignited a movement that continues to inspire and empower communities everywhere. In the final analysis, the story of Milbrook is a timeless reminder that the fight for justice is never in vain. It is a call to action for every individual to rise, to speak out, and to defend the values that bind us together as a society. When unity and integrity join forces, even the most formidable walls of corruption will crumble, and the promise of a better, fairer world can finally become a reality.